Okay, so let's look at our next task. We are going to create a select component. We have some pictures of what the designs should sort of look like. And then we have our accepted criteria. And we'll get more detail in the Figma designs that will be a bit more clear on what is required of us. But written, we have an accepted criteria of adding it to Storybook. Make sure we have all the states shown. Make sure that we have an icon. Make sure that we have text label, hint, and error message. So let's look at what that is going to look like. So you'll see here in the states that we have 5 of them here. Empty will have the placeholder. Filled will have the selected input, chosen input. Focus will give us that box shadow and border. Disabled will give us that change in background color. Open will give that added list that we see here with the background color and check mark. Icon will add the icon to it. We have the label text above and the hint below here. And then error is just a little bit different in the border and box shadow colors. You'll also notice that when the select component list is shown, that the error message text is gone. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually look at the finished product and also see it in the real world. We'll see it applied to the application itself and what that might even look like. So it'll give a better idea. It won't be just all ethereal, but actually something that works out in the wild. In this case, our application. All right, so let's look at our select component. We're going to get a brief overview of the construction of the component itself and then look at the specific details of it. Here's our storybook element with our select component. And you'll notice if we click anywhere inside the box, then we have our drop-down list. And if we click anywhere, even on the outside, we will close it. So how does this work? The select component is wrapped in a parent container with the selection itself. That's the label here. We have our messages down below it, and then the list itself here. When we look, it might be easier to look at the DOM tree. We have our parent container with the selection and then with the list here. In the label itself, we have the kernel elements of the icon, this text, and the other icon wrapped in a container. That's this over here. So we have a prefix, the text itself, and then the suffix. The prefix and suffix, if there's an icon, will return this element. And for the suffix, if we are showing our list, then we'll show the chevron up. If we're not showing the list, then we'll show the chevron down. You see that there. So that's the text itself. And you'll also notice that we show different styles for error state, disabled state, and our default state. So if we have an error, then we'll get that red. Our disabled will have the grayed out black background, and our default will give us the purple. The list itself is rendered in an interesting way. Let's look at that. So it's wrapped in a container, and there's a reason for that. We wanted some fluidity, some transition for our list, as you see there, right? Looks nice, that rolling. Because of the limitations of display property visibility, you can't put transitions upon those. So we have to work around that. And the way we work around it is by dynamically changing the height of the parent container itself. This allows us to have a dynamically sized list. So if our list is, in this case, 7 elements, then we will show a list of 7. We'll show all those 7. If it were 3, then we would only be showing 3. So instead of having to manually change the height of our list, we are dynamically changing the height of our list container. And how do we do that? Well, that's with the React's useRef and other element. So if we are not showing our list, then we want to return a height of 0, and you'll notice that right here. Okay, so our parent container will have an initial height of 0. If we're not going to be showing it, it's going to have a 0 height. But if we are going to show it, then we need to dynamically set what that height will be. How do we do that? We use the ref hook to get that node, and then we're going to call the particular function on it, get bounding client rect, and this allows us to get the height property. So in the DOM, all of our elements are housed within different rectangles, and that's how the browser knows visual aspects of it, its height, and its position. So get bounding client allows us to access those properties of our element. So that's why we put a reference on our list and on the container itself. So you'll notice when we click on the list again, now we're getting a height of 308 and a nice transition. Another important element is the selection of a text and the handling of a selection. Let's look at a selection of a text. In order to make this component versatile, we are managing our state in that aspect of lifting that state up. So we'll see later where in our application we'll be using several select components, and we want to be able to manage the state of all those select components. To do that, we can't leave that state within the component. We need to lift it up. We need to give it to its parent component. And that's what this function will do. We are passing in through the props, the handling function, and basically we're just passing it off to that. So in our select option, we are just passing along to the parent the information that they need, and then they can go do with it whatever they want it. And when that comes back, it comes back as the value. So when we get down here and we're rendering our list, we want to know if it has been selected. And we do that by comparing the value selected with the value option. If they are the same, then we will get a check mark, as you saw there, and it keeps that state there. For the error, you'll notice that we have our error message, and that is done right here. And we said that if the list is shown, then we don't want the error message. And that's what this code here does. So if we are trying to show our list, then we don't want to run this code. But if we're not trying to show our list, then we want to run that code. And that's what this will give us here. So that is a good explanation of our select component. And let's see it in the wild. It's nice to see what that might look like. So here we have two select components, and this is where I say state management of lifting the state up. So if we click on the list, and you'll notice that our drop-down list here renders well with 4 elements, whereas before we had 7 elements. So this is wonderful. We don't have to concretely change that. Another nice feature by lifting the state up is that we can reset what the user sees. So if we select error, then we have a level of error. All of our error tasks are shown here. But if I choose level, this sets it back to 0. So level, no levels at all. We get back the default setting. And here's our lifting up state, how that works together. So if we want to choose our unresolved tasks, but we also want to look at the error level of unresolved tasks, then we get our error that are unresolved. And we see that in the URL up here. So that's the importance of lifting up state. And in our next task, we'll actually look at how we created this filtering feature.